Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third and final public meeting for the master plan for the new park at Iliff and Bellaire. Before we get started, I wanted to go ahead and introduce our Spanish interpreter for the evening. Maria, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and your process, please.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es María, sean todos bienvenidos a la reunión número 3 del Plan Maestro para el nuevo parque de Iliff y Bellaire. Las reglas para la reunión virtual son de mantener sus micrófonos en silencio, las cámaras apagadas y si desea hacer alguna pregunta o comentar algo, podrá levantar la mano para hacerlo. Usaremos la interpretación simultánea para la cual podrá accederse seleccionando el lenguaje de su preferencia, haciendo clic en el icono de globo que dice interpretación. Una vez que haya hecho su selección, puede hacer clic en silenciar el audio original para que no escuche ambos idiomas al mismo tiempo. Encenderemos la interpretación ahora.
Okay, interpretation is on.
Thank you, Maria. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mallory Roybal. I am the East District Parks Planner with Denver Parks and Recreation, and I'm joined by a team from DHM Design, and I'll have everyone introduce themselves this evening.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Aisha Menendez. I'm a landscape architect with DHM Design, and I am joined by...
And this is Mark Wilcox. I am a landscape architect with DHM working with Aisha. Aisha is managing the project. I'm here to assist and advise in any way I can.
And Nick may be joining us. I think he's just lurking in the back. And then we're also joined by really our super public engagement team. And I'll turn it over to Nora.
Yep, Nora Newrider from NHN Consulting, supporting this team with communication, outreach, and engagement. I'll turn it over to Dean.
Hi, hello everybody. I'm Dean Winstanley. I'm also with NHN Consulting and have been working closely with the team on the entire public engagement process during this project.
Great, and we don't want to forget Laura Morales with Denver Parks and Rec and Community Relations.
Thanks,
Laura
Morales. Happy to be here. Excited to be at this third meeting.
Great. Great. And we have a very important guest, and I will turn it over to Councilwoman Kendra Black.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm so excited that this project is finally moving along. It's been a very long time since this community began advocating for a park, and you're finally going to get one. So thank you for joining us and participating in these meetings. The city moves very slowly, but we are moving forward. So thank you very much. I have a couple of announcements. There's 3 other community meetings this week in our district, and I just want to invite you all. There's actually one tonight at 7 o'clock at the Grace Methodist Church, which is on Yale, right by the Yale light rail station. And it's actually a candidate debate between the 2 people who are running to replace me as your council person. So if you're feeling super civically engaged and want to go outside, you can go to that debate. Tomorrow night, we have 2 other very important meetings. One is at Eisenhower Rec Center from 5:30 to 6:30. And it's to begin planning for the Welsher 100th anniversary, which will be in 2026. So join us if you're interested in that. Even though I won't be the council person anymore, I will still be on that committee because I care very much about the Welsher Golf Course and the clubhouse. And lastly, tomorrow also at 6:45 to 7:45 at Denver Academy, which is in the same neighborhood as this park, we're having a meeting to talk about some rezonings that I am working on in this neighborhood and the new proposed development on Iliff next to Denver Academy. The developers will be there. So if you need more information on these, just shoot me an email or check my website, and I hope you'll attend. And I'll stop talking, but thank you very much to the team. from the architect team, the engagement team, and the Parks and Rec team. I'm super excited about this new University Hills Park.
Great, thank you. Moving along, just some of the things we wanted to cover at today's meeting. We'll try to recap briefly the project, some of our the progress. We'll also look at what we've developed as the preferred concept for the park. Know that this is the master plan level. And then we'll look at some of the next steps. As you'll recall, we started with really trying to reach out to the community and understand where you were and also who you were. So we were looking at, your adjacency to the park and also your adjacency to some of the other parks in the community. Part of realizing this new park at Bellaire and Iliff is really closing the gap, trying to provide green space for everybody in the city within a 10-minute walk, about a half mile, depending on how you walk. We also wanted to know who you were and how you thought you might use the park. One thing that we learned is that, within this community, about 75% of the people who responded to the survey were between 25 and 54, so young, in my opinion, and that the children that were in the community were fairly young, that most children actually were under 13. And this helps us, think about what amenities we really want to, explore with the community. We also spent some time just looking at the site. As you know, the site is sort of long and narrow. It's between some single-family homes, some multifamily homes. Also, there is the Primrose School. And what we don't see on this map, but what we saw previously, is it is about 3 blocks, maybe, from the Colorado Station light rail. Oops. I'm going to ask Mark Wilcox to just talk a little bit about this. These are really the guiding principles for Denver Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, thanks, Aisha. So we kept in mind as we engaged in conversations with you and the community, as well as we developed designs for the park, that Denver has set these 4 guiding principles as part of the game plan for parks, that every drop counts. So water conservation techniques and how do we make them more resilient, environmentally sustainable, looking at drought tolerant species, whether it's in turf or plants, or introducing low water use demand irrigation types. And then every person looking at inclusiveness, making sure that we have parks and trails within that half-mile radius. And this helps to add to that goal that we're developing a new park in a neighborhood that people can have access to. That ensures the equitable distribution of parks within the city. Every dollar, looking at costs, and we know right now costs have escalated quite a bit in the last few years. So looking at how we can work within the budgets, within being conscious and aware of the cost for different features and different types of construction, and ensuring that long-term it works within the finances and the funding available for the park. And then uniquely Denver. These are parks and programming that reflect the Denver's community, the character that we have in the West and the Rocky Mountain area, and making sure it's integrated within the Denver park system. So it's uniquely Denver in that sense.
Great, thank you, Mark. In addition to the meetings, which hopefully you've all attended, we did host 2 pop-up events, one at the farmers market. We did a second one at the holiday market, and got some great feedback. We had the plans out to show and just really want to understand or hear your thoughts and really gather your feedback. Part of that was looking at we did a survey, looking at some of the different amenities that we could include at the park. And we got some pretty definitive answers. The top 5 were, really a call to just enjoy nature, And I think just to have some green space available where you can go and you can exercise, you can get your steps in, you can also relax and just, as we said, enjoy nature. Also leaving some space where you could maybe host or, have a little bit of a larger group gathered there. And then also the playground. So there are the kids in the area and they want somewhere to play. So we have incorporated that. Part of the survey results as well, we were asking how you might use the park. And I talked about the playground. I talked about the trails. People are also asking for shade, plenty of shade trees, because we all know it's very hot in the Denver summer, including some trails that would cover and that would be useful to people walking, riding, wheelchairs, strollers, kids, and skateboards. There's also a concern and a call to make sure the park is well maintained. That is a little beyond our master plan level, although we have made sure that we've included plenty of trash receptacles and areas for disposal. I think an overarching concern for a lot of the community is just making it safe. There is a concern about some of the unhoused population in the neighborhood, and we want this park to be for everyone. Also, trying to look at a number of different uses. It's as you all know, it's a really great eclectic neighborhood. So we wanted to be able to respond to families, to an older population, to kids, and also to, the dog owners. That was important too, as you all know who've been to these prior meetings. So just one last note on security. One thing that as designers, Mark and I are very keen on are some of these principles of crime prevention through environmental design. And a lot of that has to do with just, making sure that public access and routes are clearly defined, trying to maximize the visibility to people in and outside of the park, providing adequate lighting, and also balancing that lighting between, in the evening for park use versus the adjacent neighbors. But also wanted to remind everybody joining us that we do have both the park rangers and the Denver police available, and there will be posted park rules. So there's no overnight camping, there is an overnight curfew. So that's all the stuff we covered in the past. And then after that, or almost all the stuff, from there, we went to 3 different schemes that we had looked at, which we gave these names, sort of Dutch Heritage, the Greenhouse, and the Urban Wild. The Greenhouse was obviously a nod to ground covers, greenhouse, and we've also continued to include a garden in here, really as an homage to them. We've tried to, in all the schemes, tried to incorporate some areas where we would have large open turf. So for pickup games, for kids to run around, and then of course playgrounds, a pavilion, some community space, and then also a balance of turf areas that we talked about, but also native or natural areas that would be a lot more water tolerant. And then again, the shade trees I mentioned. So we went through this, we heard your comments, and we came up with this. And we're going to ask for your comments again. So quickly, you would entry into the park, of course, would be from either Warren or Iliff. Coming over from Warren, and actually on Iliff, we have an entry plaza, a little bit larger of an entry plaza or of a sidewalk that announces that you are stepping into a special space. We then have a fairly significant what we're calling event lawn, so that, you can really burn some of that kiddo energy off. Situated at one edge of that is a shade structure. And underneath that shade structure would be some picnic tables. So this has sort of multiple use, where for both picnicking, but also there is the possibility that you might do a little bit of a larger event and you could start to use this event lawn. Coming through the park, then we have a playground, and that playground is divided by age. We have the younger age, 2 to 5, and then the little bit older kids, 5 to 12. Passing through there is some more open turf and play area. And then we've also incorporated some interpretive gardens. And the vision here is that these could be some really bright, colorful, even pollinator-friendly gardens, and incorporate in with that some educational signage so that people can understand the benefit and the value of offering some of these environments to both the critters and to improving air quality and just to the people coming through the park. After, again, this rather passive use, we go into another very active use. So we've incorporated a half court basketball court, which could also be used for foursquare or catch or anything, but a little bit more active, and also maybe moved away from the kids in case a pickup game gets kind of hot. And then we also have a picnic. I call it a picnic area, but a place for people to put their bags and their picnic and to cheer on the fellas playing, and women, the men and the women playing basketball. And then that is buffered again by a little bit of an open area with some native landscape, and again, a little bit of a larger scale entry plaza. What else? We studied a couple of different options for how you might circulate through the park. And we really felt like when we started to study it in 3 dimensions, that having a little bit of a circulating path started to create these little rooms for us. So that this was sort of a real active area. This could be a more passive, enjoying nature area. And so trying to sort of create this park for really everyone. So I'm going to keep going, but we do have plenty of time and we do want to hear your feedback. So just some of the things that we're thinking of as we move forward and that you will have more involvement in when we get into the design phase. Incorporating a playground is important. We've heard calls for spinners and slides and swings and climbing. So we'll capture all of that. Just some of the amenities.
Aisha, can you go back to the
Yes.
previous slide real quick? I just wanted to note that that image in the upper left is a 3D rendering of the park space of the current design that shows the playground, how it fits with the landscape, the trees. And we took some photographs of the site to show realistic backgrounds to that. So it is a true to match photo match of the on-site conditions out there from that perspective.
Correct. Thanks, Mark. I know I should be tooting our horn a little bit more. So we see here, this would be a proposed view to the park from Iliff, looking north. So you can start to see one of the buildings at the Colorado station. So here we have some area, just turf to run and to play, bordered maybe by some native areas, a little seating area, and then of course our basketball. And then we do have around the perimeter of the park is where we've tried to incorporate more of the native water resistant or water tolerant, drought tolerant landscape, and also the shade trees. And that's really about trying to create a buffer between the park and the neighbors. And then I think just a couple more, just wanted to communicate again about got ahead of myself, some of the other amenities. So we of course will have benches, we will have receptacles. We are looking at a shelter. This is not necessarily the shelter by any means, but something that will give you some shade and a place to picnic. But lastly was really talking a little bit more about those landscape typologies, so that we might have turf. We would then have, as I talked about, some interpretive gardens, really hoping that this could be, a really happy pollinator garden, and also some color, and also sort of a buffer between our different uses. Got our basketball back here. And also been, working with Denver Parks and Rec and their ecological team to understand really what the native areas might look like. So I think this is a good, I'm not sure, this is a park in Denver. The name is escaping me now, but you can start to see a little bit of this contrast between the two areas. And I think the intention really is to when possible, also incorporate colorful flowers and forbs, so that this becomes a really, we're trying to reflect a native pre-development landscape here. And importantly, it gives us an opportunity to really save a lot of water. So I'm going to make sure that everybody has been listening. And I just want to ask, what is your favorite part about the design concept? You can pick one, or I suppose you can pick more than one. And certainly, I anticipate that there are some households who have differing opinions.
Okay, responses are coming in. We have about 50% participated, so I'll leave it open for a bit.
So I don't live in this district, in this area. This will not be my park, but my favorite is the basketball court. Do I get to vote? Can you vote for me?
And then before we close it, just to say aloud, the options were playground, basketball court, lawn areas, picnic areas, gardens, and walking paths. And we have about 65% participated, and it's slowed down a lot. So I think maybe people are not going to participate. So I'm going to end this in a few seconds. Get your last vote in. Oh, good. It's taken up there. Okay. We've heard from about 40 people. I love our turnout tonight. Thank you guys for coming. Okay, another one. Okay, now I'm going to hit end and we'll see the results. All right, do you see those?
I see them on mine.
Great, yeah, it looks like walking paths was the top with 73%, followed by gardens at 56%. And then the rest come in around 30 or so.
Great. And I'm really happy to see that the walking paths came up so high, because that's something I didn't really explore. But one thing that we really did want to do was incorporate, a couple of different paths. Here we go. So we have a sort of a primary path, but then we have some secondary paths that loop around the different activities. And we think this is really important when we're anticipating a lot of dog walking. So that was something that we were really keen on from the beginning. And that's all I have. Certainly wanted to ask your opinion. Nora was going to help us kind of facilitate some of your questions or any of your comments.
Here's our box. Our camera should come on.
So I'm going to lead off with a conversation that's been ongoing since day one of this project within the community and on these meetings. And that has to do with the dog park. And Aisha and maybe Mallory, I'm wondering if you can address sort of the thinking from beginning to end regarding the decision as to whether to include a dog park or not, and why you ended up where you did.
Yeah, I can start. Aisha, maybe you can fill in anything that I
Sure.
missed. Yes, we received so much input, and we appreciate everyone who provided their input about dogs and the need for some areas with walking their dogs and some considerations of a dog park. And some of the thoughts behind not including the dog park in this plan was ultimately some of the comments that we received about both being a dog owner, but just wanting a space to walk their dogs, and really emphasizing the need to have some waste dispensers throughout the park so that you can walk your dog and clean up after your dog. But also to utilize the space to its fullest capacity. And it is an unusual size. It's not a large area. And so even some of the feedback that we received in favor of a dog park also said that it might not be a substantial dog park in this space, just given the size constraints. So we ultimately decided to not include that in this plan, but really emphasize the need for those waste stops throughout the park, and to really give people an opportunity to walk their dogs and enjoy the space. Additionally, this park is our first acquisitions project. It's our first acquired land through acquired property through our funds that voters had approved to say we want more space for parks and open space. And given this area falls in an area that is in need of being within a 10-minute walk or roll distance to a park, we really wanted to emphasize the full utility of the park for that capacity, for you to be able to come and visit and walk and enjoy the space. A dog park would certainly serve that role as well. But again, given the size, we felt that this made more sense to remove it from this design and still emphasize that ability for those to walk their dogs in the park. And Aisha, I'll let you fill in anything that I may have missed.
No, you covered it. I would just remind folks that, we did look at some of the other dog parks that might be a comparable size. And we did have a couple of people who say, a dog park that small isn't really fun. It isn't really fun for the dogs because it is so small. Because we were looking at about, I don't remember the number, but it was very comparable to the little dog park that's by Carla Matterson Rec Center on Colfax, also Sunny Lawson. So these are less than half an acre, and they're adequate, but they're not great. So we decided to emphasize more of the great stuff in the park instead of, and then, make sure that people did have the facilities to walk their dog.
Lauren asked a follow-up question. Will there be maintained dog stations near each of the trash receptacles?
So we provide the area to include bags, but it's still up to dog owners to clean up and to also stock the bags, because we can't provide bags for all of them across our park system. But in general, we've seen that as very successful throughout our other parks as well.
And I know in my
Thanks.
community, a number of people support their own. I mean, they have a number of different dispensing stations that people supply.
Thanks, Aisha. Joan asks about accessibility. She would like to see wheelchair accessible picnic tables, and asks whether playground equipment will be universally accessible playground equipment.
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking that question and bringing that to our attention. We are required, but we like to go above and beyond providing access for all abilities. Our picnic tables will be accessible in that regard. And we will go into a design process for the playground, which we will be looking for more.
Mallory must have had a hiccup, but again, this is something that is very important to Denver Parks and Rec, and also very important to the design community. So And there's so much more knowledge and around this now. So, making sure that the play areas are inclusive. And of course, making sure incorporating, not just the minimum, but making sure that all of the picnic tables are accessible, and of course, all of the paths.
Right, and just to add to that, Aisha, we will comply with the ADA code for all public spaces. So that includes the paths, the picnic tables, the features. The playground will meet ADA code for compliance with transfer stations on and off the equipment, as well as the surfacing and the ramps into the play pit. The question will be, as Mallory mentioned, that Denver goes up above and beyond the code when it comes to their public spaces to try to do more than the code requires. And with playgrounds, there's different levels. I mean, there's ADA compliance, but there's also inclusivity. So we'll look at introducing a lot of more all-inclusive features within the playground itself, and that'll start to be developed in the next stages of design.
Speaking of next stages of design, we have a number of questions about timeline. And what timeline people can expect going forward from this point in the planning
Sure.
process.
So I know Mallory had intended to spend some time talking about that. And I think when she gets logged on, she can probably give us some more and better information. The next step will be moving through the, schematic design development phases. And with that, coupled with that, of course, will be additional public engagement. I've just been showing you pictures of play equipment, but there'll be a lot more in-depth. Mark, maybe you can talk about that, just having finished up some of these other parks.
Yeah,
And
so
Mallory's back in too, in
Okay.
case. Yep,
Super.
go ahead, Mark.
yeah, so as far as the playground designs right now, we're showing concept level to show general locations, general types of features. But as we begin getting into the next phase of design, once the master plan is complete, the report finalized, and then funding is in alignment for construction, we'll start looking at what we call it schematic design, which is our preliminary designs. We start to engage with different playground vendors to see what are the options for different features, different playground equipment types, and we go back to the community with 2 or 3 options on the playground to see what is it that you really want to see in these playgrounds. And we'll start diving deeper into that as we start reviewing what the different vendors can offer for these different age zones.
And then that will all get incorporated into construction documents. Those documents will then be will need to be bid and contractor brought on board, and then construction, with the space this size might be 6 to 9 months. So I think we're looking at about a 2025 start date. And a lot of this is dependent on, and again, I don't want to put words into Mallory's mouth, but a lot of this is going to be somewhat dependent on the bond funding.
And Mallory, if you're back with us, the question was about timeline. We've been doing the best that we can to answer that question in your absence, but I don't know if you're able to join in that conversation.
Yes, I apologize for cutting out. Were we already able to show the slide with the timeline?
No, I'll move to that.
That might be a good reference. So I apologize for missing the conversation. So if I cover anything, it's just good reiteration. But as we finish up the master plan process here in the spring, we will begin to move into a design and construction process. So the design process will generally follow with community engagement involved, as discussed about some further design for the playground and further input for various components of this concept. That's what we will be coming out to you all to gain some additional information and input. We do have RISE bond funds as well as some capital improvement program funds in the amount of approximately $6.5 million for implementation of the design and into construction. That will be available on a bond timeline, and those funds will be released. So it's probably around the 2024 time range that those funds are available to move into implementation. So that's why we do have the timeline listed here as 2023 to 2025, because that encompasses the full design and implementation timeline moving forward.
And since we're on this slide, we do have a question in the chat about naming and naming opportunities. I'm wondering if we could touch on that since we have a note about it at the bottom of the slide.
Sure.
Yeah, I can just get it started. So as you know, our park names are super important. They can be very meaningful for community. And for that reason, Parks and Rec does not name our parks from the department. We need community to come forward, propose a name, and then it goes through a system that we have in our policy. But to help you all do that, because policies are not the most fun thing to go through, is we're going to put together a small committee of some community members, some reps from our Parks and Recreation Advisory Board that live in the district. The council office is excited about this and going to be involved as well, and have a rep as well. So we're putting this committee together and we need you to help us. This committee is going to be not super long or intense. We just need somebody to come together, say, what ideas, how do we want to solicit ideas for names? How do we want to rank those names? How do we want to vote on those names? And this is a committee that gets to decide how the process looks. They are not the be all end all of picking a name. That is up to everyone in the community. And so they get to kind of come together and think what a good way to do that would be with our support. So I'm going to put something in the chat where if you are interested in being a part of this committee, or if you have questions, you can fill this form out. And here we go. That is in the chat, or just email me. I'll put my cell phone in the chat if you just want to give me a call, or text me if you're unsure. But if you're at all interested or excited about the idea of naming this park, we want you to support us. So that's my pitch.
Thank you, Laura. We do have two questions in the chat about maintenance. The first being about who maintains the flower beds. The second being about shoveling. And particularly snow clearance on the paths. The individual, Lisa, indicates that right now she shovels, or her neighborhood helps to shovel the sidewalk on Iliff because it doesn't get shoveled otherwise. So if we could address those two questions about maintenance.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We do maintain our parks. We do shovel the walks. I'm sorry to hear that you've had to go out yourself and shovel, but thank you for doing that. I will let our maintenance team know of that, because despite the fact that this park is not developed yet, we should be maintaining what is on the park property. So we will look into that. But then the gardens we will maintain. It will depend on the type of design and the type of maintenance that is needed there, but that will fall under Denver Parks and Recreation. This would not be something like a formalized community garden, which would require additional maintenance, probably from outside community groups and other organizations that we've worked with in the past, like Denver Urban Gardens, in some of our more formalized urban gardens. This would not be one of those types of needs. So this would be overseen by our department.
Thanks, Mallory. Catherine asks, how much seating is there going to be in the park? And will the community be able to reserve seating for gatherings and parties?
I can start with that. I can tell you that we currently, and again, this is a very conceptual plan, but we have, I believe, 12 benches and 4 picnic tables. And then Mallory, I'm going to turn it over to you about permitting.
Yes, thank you, Aisha. The space that will be permitted picnic space will be on the northern end of the park, closest to Evans. And that will be a space that you will be able to go through our permitting process to reserve and use for, birthday parties or small gatherings. That open grass area is designed for more of a use that might be associated with use of the picnic area, but that will certainly be a permitted picnic site within our system.
We actually have a follow-up question related to that spot. Jennifer asks, she particularly liked the covered space in the urban wild concept, which was designated for community gatherings and was a larger feature. Is there any chance of revisiting providing a larger covered feature at that location?
We will certainly look into a more detailed look at some of what those pavilions might look like. The reason we've scaled this down is to create more of a typical permitted picnic site that we do have on our system. Given the location of this park and its proximity to some of the single-family residential homes and the multifamily apartments nearby, we certainly didn't want this to be something that was a true event space where you hold, larger gatherings. This is a park that's meant to really serve the neighborhood immediate to the park. Obviously, visitors will come in and visit this park as well, but we didn't want it to be too large of a scale to accommodate more events versus small events for picnicking.
Although my heavy metal band needs a place to play, maybe we could do that in the community area.
Looking for a venue.
Yes.
Quick clarification regarding shoveling. Brad does the shoveling all by himself. No neighborhood engagement involvement there. So, but we do have a question from Tim about lighting. Is there a lighting plan? And what are the usage hours of the park?
I'm going to defer to Mallory about the usage hours. We do not have lighting shown on this plan. However, we are making provisions to include that moving forward. That is a very delicate question, obviously, especially if you live right next to the park. It's likely that the primary walkway could be illuminated with, say, bollards or, like 3-foot high lights, as opposed to certainly not any larger overhead street type of lighting.
Yes, thank you, Aisha. I'll add to that. Like in any of our parks, we do try and strike a balance between the proximity to other uses and the safety considerations and having lighting throughout our park for its use. We do have the park hours from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. That's our designated park use hours. And we do provide enough lighting. We will provide enough lighting to ensure the safety of the use of the park, but not to encourage use of certain spaces after those designated park hours. So it certainly is a balancing act in terms of where the location of that lighting will go, and we will go into that in more detail in the design process. But just be assured that we will integrate lighting throughout this park in consideration of some of the feedback that we have received from those safety considerations and the proximity to our neighbors.
Since we're on the subject of safety, there is a question regarding interceding to prevent the park being a site that's used for illicit drug use, and safety measures that are put into place to address that kind of use of the park that is technically not allowed.
We rely heavily on our rangers as well as the police department to assist with any illegal activities within our parks. But we do allow anybody to use our parks. It's available to anyone and open to anyone to visit. So unless an activity is illegal, anybody is welcome. So we do have our rangers in place to assist with those kinds of activities. And we do have that happen in some of our parks across the city, and our rangers do their best to respond to those when needed.
Thanks, Mallory. We have a comment about the importance of shade. Can you speak to the shade opportunities that are part of this park design?
Sure. So we have made an effort. We tried to really pack those perimeter edges with shade trees. And the thinking being that those are species that would be, larger shade trees. In the meantime, we do have the shade, or I should say the shelter or pavilion. But we are trying to, and because of the orientation of the park, we are planting both edges so that we can try to mitigate both sort of morning and especially afternoon, provide some shade in the afternoon when that sun is really beating down on the the west.
With regards to trees, there is a question about fruit trees. Does DPR plant fruit trees in their park spaces?
That is a good question, and I do not know the exact answer to that. I know we don't have a whole lot of examples of fruit trees in our system because of the maintenance considerations. They certainly can be a bit messy, and so that can be a consideration when we're planting trees through our forestry department. But I can certainly follow up and have some more answers when we get into the design phase to talk more about that. But to my knowledge, we just don't often integrate fruiting trees within our parks from the maintenance standpoint.
Thanks, Mallory. We have lots of comments about how pleased people are to see all of the elements that were discussed throughout this process represented in one way or another, apart from the dog park in this design. We have a question about fencing. Will there be fencing or gates on the north or south ends of the park so that it's closed during official non-use hours for security reasons?
No, we do not fence off our parks. The only time that we put up some fences if they wouldn't be gated or locked. We would put up fences as a barrier for safety considerations or separation of uses, but we would not fence or lock off this park.
Thanks, Mallory. I think we've actually hit on all the questions in the chat. There have been some really terrific questions. We appreciate that. Certainly, if there's anybody who wants to take themselves off mute and ask a question verbally, we welcome that as well. Oh, we actually do have another question in the chat. Jody asks, what are the opportunities for public art?
Yeah, that's a great question. As a part of implementation of this project, we will have a component of public art involved in this process. So that will also take place in parallel to our design and implementation process. So please continue to be engaged in this process because that will be a component.
What about a water fountain? Are water fountains placed in parks?
If you recall from our presentation, a couple slides towards the beginning, Mark Wilcox had covered some considerations that come from the department's game plan for a healthy community. And in consideration of some of the every drop and consideration of water conservancy and our climate, we very strategically place fountains and like play areas with water throughout our parks. For drinking fountains, it's a cost balance in a lot of cases. In a park that's kind of this size and smaller and in proximity to residences, it'd be a very similar consideration to some of our restrooms in our parks, because we anticipate most visitors are walking in a distance that are close to their homes and where they reside. We generally don't integrate those within parks like this park and its anticipated use.
Tyler asks, are the existing fences along the edges of the park going to remain? And if they do, would they be upgraded?
Those fences are fences on private property. So it will be up to the owners of those fences, whether they keep those or upgrade those. We would not be integrating a fence line as a part of this project. We will just leave it up to those private property owners to decide how they manage their fences on their properties.
We had a quick question about the name of the nursery that used to be on this property, and Ground Covers was the name of that establishment. So I believe we have covered the questions in the chat. And again, if there's anybody who would like to make a comment or ask a question out loud, you're welcome to do that. Oh, we actually have another question in the chat. If property owners want to upgrade the fencing on private property, would 8-foot fencing be allowed?
I would have to look at the zoning requirements for this area and to determine the fence height requirements here. I believe given in a backyard setting, that might be a possibility. But again, it's very site specific, and it falls in line with our Denver zoning code.
Okay. Emily Rubin indicates that she thinks it might be allowed because it's commercial. It's certainly a question to pursue as this design moves forward. If there are no other questions in the chat or from folks who would like to speak out loud, we continue to have some questions regarding fencing. If zoning doesn't allow an 8-foot fence, does Denver Parks and Rec ever get engaged in helping to pursue a variance?
Unfortunately, we would only be able to oversee the fencing on our property. That would be something that you'd have to seek through the zoning code and their process. So we'd have to abide by their permitting process, and the variance would be sought through their process as well. So unfortunately, no, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Jody. I'm just going to speak. It's easier than typing. I think early in the conversation, there were some suggestions about like mulch or rubber or not sand. And I think I might like have opinions, especially around the playground for what I want the ground to be. But I was just curious, like why are the opinions kind of strong about the ground cover, and what should we know about that choice?
That's a great question. And it really comes down to a lot of accessibility questions. We do not integrate sand into our play areas any longer. That doesn't meet accessibility. But we've heard similar responses to mulch. Despite the fact that it does meet ADA requirements, it is very difficult to navigate if you have any kind of mobility needs that navigating the playground can be very difficult. So in consideration of that, we have a lot of individuals who advocate for kind of this poured in place rubber type material, because it just meets a lot more accessibility needs. So that is most likely why we're getting those comments, and it completely makes sense to start to integrate some of those considerations as we move into the design process.
Well, with 4 minutes left in our time together, maybe we should go to our closing slides.
So we did talk about our timeline and our next steps. I'm just going to give you one more chance to write down Laura Morales' email address if you want to be part of the naming committee. Also just wanted to remind you all that the Near Southeast Neighborhood Planning Initiative is still open. You can find that through denvergov.org, Near Southeast Plan, to participate. And then just lastly, thank you for your time. We do have, there is a project page for this this new park that's on the Denver Parks and Rec project page. You can also find that at bit.ly, U Hills Park. And then of course, you've all heard and seen Mallory this evening, who is the project contact and would be able to answer any additional questions.
We had a quick question in the chat regarding a community meeting, the one at Denver Academy that was mentioned by Councilwoman Black.
Oh yeah.
It's tomorrow at 6:45 p.m. at Richardson Hall. We do have one last question before we leave you for the evening, and that has to do with bike parking. There's a request that it be highly visible with lots of space for cargo bikes.
Oh, okay.
But otherwise, the park plan looks terrific.
Well, thank you, whomever that was. And just to let you know, we have bike parking at either end. We are incorporating, at least probably 6 total. And you make a really good point that the separation or the distance and spacing needs to accommodate more than just a single bike, but potentially, yeah, a cargo bike.
Well, and I look forward to seeing some people apply to be part of this committee. It's nothing scary. It's going to be fun. So please, if you have at all any interest in kind of helping to represent your neighborhood and then get their voices into a name that will suit the neighborhood, we need you. So if you're at all interested, don't be shy. And I'll be reaching out to people on that soon. So thank you all. Thanks for joining.
And keep an ear open. You know, once we get into design, there'll be more opportunities for community engagement. And I know in the past we had some playground experts on the call, so we're definitely going to need them. But this is your chance to really help inform the development of your park.
All right. I will go ahead and end the meeting, and we'll put the recording online and share back out with you in the future. But thank you, and thanks to our interpreter. Have a good night.
Good night.